Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Global Participation Fund, Building Equity and Research for the Common Good. I'm Kimberly Iniger, Events and Outreach Specialist at ORCID. Before we get started, I'd like to bring your attention to some features available during today's webinar, and I invite you to take the poll to give us a little bit more information about who you are and why you're joining us today. The first item I'd like to let you know about is the closed captioning and translated captions features. These features allow you to enable audio captions and translate those captions into a few different languages. To enable, click on the Show Captions button in your Zoom toolbar. We also have a dedicated Q&A channel, and we invite you to submit your questions throughout the session. To do so, click on the Q&A button in the Zoom toolbar. You can also view questions other attendees have submitted, upvote questions you're interested in, and add comments. We have some helpful documentation available to assist you in accessing these features, which is available in the Resources tab in your Zoom toolbar. Finally, this session is being recorded, and the recording, along with the session materials, will be shared after the session. Now, I'd like to welcome our ORCID Grant Program Officer, Lombe Tembo Shuma. Lombe?
Thanks, Kimberly. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm just going to share my screen real quick so we can jump right into it. Sorry about that. I do not know what is happening. Just a second. My computer has decided to... Okay, there we go. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yep, it looks good.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm going to talk about the Global Participation Program. And so this is a flow of how this will go. I'll start with an overview of the GPP, and then I will talk a bit about the GPF objectives and structure, also about what a complete application looks like. We'll talk a bit about the previous awardees from the first and second cycle, and also the grant monitoring and evaluation, and finally some Q&A at the end. So what is the Global Participation Program? So basically, this is a program and an initiative that was launched in response to the needs of the community in partnership with our generous partners. And what we do know is that we continue to see growing adoption around the world with users in 250 countries. So in terms of individual users of ORCID, we were quite covered, but in terms of member organizations, we have these in 57 countries. And this map here shows the consortium members in green, and the blue shows ORCID members. So as you can see, in Africa, we have very few member institutions, but we do have over 9 million yearly active researchers, over 1,300 organizational members, and over 5,000 active integrated member systems. More information can be found at info.orcid.org/ORCID statistics, in case you're interested in getting more information on that. And research has shown that ORCID adoption is currently higher in countries that have higher income levels. And while this is indicative, this data points to the disadvantages that researchers in the Global South face in terms of getting equitable visibility as well as recognition for their work. And this is why we are trying to use the Global Participation Program to fix this. So the GPP is a two-pronged approach to achieving this goal, with the first part being the Membership Equity Program, and the second being the Global Participation Fund, which is currently open for applications. So in terms of the Membership Equity Program, this specific program is for organizations that would like to form a consortium. And what we know is that what we have is a discounted membership fee structure for consortium members. And so if the organization comes from a low income country, they would have an 80% discount. And for organizations that come from lower middle income countries, there's a 50% discount. And then in addition to that, there's a lower threshold of 3 members for the initial year, as opposed to 5 members, which would happen if the membership equity program was not in existence. This program is fully funded by ORCID. On the other hand, we have the Global Participation Fund, which has two distinctive grant programs. The first one being the Community Development and Outreach Grant. And this is basically to fund local partners who would then go ahead to build ORCID communities of practice in the Global South. And then secondly, we have the Technical Integration Grants, which are meant to fund development of systems that are likely to drive participation in the Global South. And this aspect is made possible by the generosity of ORCID's founding lenders, while the admin costs are covered by ORCID. So for these specific classifications, we use the World Bank income classification, which is updated annually. The most recent one was in June or July, but it's all on the website, and links can be shared in case of any questions or if you're looking for clarity. So in terms of the structure, this program supports a diversity of grantees to spread the risk and also to increase the chance of positive outcomes. So on an annual basis, we have 2 grant cycles, and the one that is currently running is the overall third, but it's the second that we have this year. And every cycle we have about 5 grants that we accept, and each of these applies for between $5,000 and $20,000 US. In terms of grantee benefits, the first is that there is dedicated ORCID staff contact. There is invitation to participate in the ORCID grantee forum and community. Also invitations to grantee community events, invitations to ORCID virtual and in-person events. And lastly, inclusion in ORCID's ongoing communications program. So in terms of the objectives and the structure, so the focus and the goals of the fund align with ORCID's strategic objective to increase global participation. But the communities that we focus on are those that are based in low and lower middle income countries. So for organizations that are engaged in research and scholarships, this is really important because we can't fund organizations that are, might be doing great work in maybe agriculture, like the actual farming or that sort of thing. But if it's not something that is linked to research and scholarship in these particular areas, then it's not something that we can fund. So in terms of the goals, we're trying to remedy ORCID participation gaps in the focus community areas by providing grants that would be able to develop ORCID communities of practice in the focus communities, which are the low and lower middle income countries. Also to build understanding and use of ORCID in local contexts. And lastly, to create and enhance technical integrations to support these communities. So if an application covers one or more of these goals, that would increase the chance of that application going through. So just to break down on these specific grant programs, in terms of the community development and outreach grants, these can be used to build communities and also to support communities. So this can look like local partners that are trying to build ORCID communities of practice. It could also mean local outreach, training, and tech support resources that could create and grow ORCID consortia in the focus communities. And then in terms of the technical integration grants, till date, we've only had one awardee under the technical integration grants. So these grants are mainly to build integrations, to build utilities, and also for support use. So in terms of supporting the creation of technical documentation, outreach, and support for resources created through the grant program. It can also be to build or update ORCID integrations in open source systems, which are likely to support and encourage ORCID participation by those in the focus communities. Excuse me. So in terms of what a complete application looks like, so there are 2 main steps for submitting an application. The first step being registration, and the second being the actual application form. So to register, you would have to go to this link, and the link has been shared by Kimberly as well. So info.orcid.org/global participation program. the slides will also be shared in case of doubt. So when you go to this link, you'd find this this page, and you'd click on the right where it says apply for a GPF grant, and there's the link there that you would click, which would allow you to open the registration form. So this is what the registration form looks like. You'd have to select which specific grant program you are applying for. So it would be important before you actually start that you know what you know where your program lies, if it's under technical integration or under community development and outreach. And so you'd be filling in your information here, your names, your email address, and you just follow all the slots there. Excuse me. So if your organization is an ORCID member, you can include that there. But just to add that this the GPF is not only limited to organizations that are ORCID members. So even members that are not, even organizations, I beg your pardon, even organizations that are not ORCID members are open to apply for the funding. And then the final step in the registration process is to include this information in terms of, excuse me, your organization identifier. So you'd say the type of identifier that it is, and you put the identifier up there. And then you just take on the attestation. You can click there if you need to read this, to read both the attestation and the privacy policy. And then lastly, you can say where you heard about the call for applications from. And that's it. You click on complete registration and prepare your proposal, and that is instantly going to take you to the application form. But you will receive an email that is going to give you a link that you can come back to when you need to access your application. That's the link there, and this is the PIN that would allow you to access the applicant portal. So this then takes you to the application form. So it's important to note that all the questions that are shown in the application form are required fields, with the exception of the last question, which is on uploading any optional materials. So please, I would like to stress that it would be great if you could answer the questions as concisely as possible, and also take note of the character limit. So if there's a question about the project description, your project name, the character limits are shown at the end in the text box over there. So there are instructions there. The words that are in gray are the instructions, or a few more details about how to answer the specific questions. And if in doubt, please do reach out, but it's all explained. So for instance, under the project description, it says, please provide a short description of your project, include the approach you intend to take and the outcomes you expect to achieve. And always make sure to save as draft so that you don't lose all your hard work. And there's more questions about why this project, and you can talk about why you chose to pursue this particular project. There's a question about the project structure, which will talk about the activities that you hope to carry out, the task breakdown, the timeline, and also the resource allocation. Those are things that you could include under the project structure. And this question has been misunderstood by a few applicants, so maybe I can talk about it a bit more. So the question is, how does your project build upon or contribute to other new or existing programs, infrastructure, or previous work? So this question is supposed to be distinguishing between previous work conducted by your project team or organization and external initiatives and projects. So this is how you're linking what you're already doing to this current project that you are applying for. And So this is when you can talk about how you've been implementing a project on something specific and how the additional project will either feed into the bigger picture, into your vision of or the mission. And all of this will have to still be connected to how this feeds into ORCID's goals as well. And that also leads to organizational alignment, because then you would be talking about how the project aligns with your organization's mission and goals. And, you can then explain that a bit further. So in terms of how you plan to connect to other programs, that's just you talking about how the project will build upon or contribute to other new or existing programs or previous work or infrastructure. And so excuse me, the question on the plans once the grant period has finished is basically about your sustainability plan. How do you hope to continue with this, with the work even after the grant period is over? And then how much funding are you requesting? That's just the figure between $5,000 and $20,000. And then you can upload your file here when you create your project budget. So you just submit the budget that includes the size of the grant and how you're breaking it down, how you expect to use these funds. And after you're done with all of that, you hit submit. And also you would be able to add any additional materials. And this could be maybe a list of organizations that have endorsed your work. It could be links to project sites. It could be additional explanations for your project that you believe would be helpful for your application. It could be diagrams or charts. So this is absolutely optional. You could do this, or you can skip out on it, but this is the only question that is optional. And after that, you would see the screen that says, congratulations on your submission. Make sure that it says submitted up here, just so you're able to, so that we're able to look at all the hard work you put into your application. You are also able to edit your application until the deadline. So if there's any additional information you feel you might have forgotten the first time around, you can still go back and edit that. You can go back and edit your application. So in terms of the cycle 1 and 2 awardees, we awarded the first cycle grantees in 2022, and these were EcoConnect, Africa Archive, CLISC, UVCI, which are community development and outreach grants, and only one technical integration grant, which was a partnership between the Technical University of Hamburg and For Science. You can read more about them. There's a link included there. So in case you would want to see how the type of grants that we have funded in the past, you can click on that link. And then the second round of grantees that we awarded, this happened earlier this year. So this was cycle 2. This was cycle 2. And the organizations that received the funding are InflipNet, based in India. This is ITOCA, PKP, and University of Sri in Sri Lanka. Also, you can read about their work here. I think this would be really helpful for in case you would like to see how you can improve your application, or also just to see the type of organizations that we have funded in the past. So I think also something that might be helpful is some of the things that stood out about the current grantees that we have. So complete applications that demonstrated impact and fed into the objectives. So what we're looking for is, if you submit an application that shows exactly how you're going to support the focus communities that we spoke about earlier, and how this feeds into ORCID's overall objectives, that would really help your application. Secondly, projects that provide a multiplier effect, which has both direct and indirect impact in the long run. That's another big one. So if, I think a hint here might be that if your project is looks more like a one-off activity that doesn't really have impact, that might not really support your application. So if you're able to show that the work that you're doing with this grant is going to have a further impact either in other organizations or within your country or your community, then that would be really helpful. And then thirdly, demonstrating value for money in their applications with efficient use of resources. Value for money, if you can show how that the money that you're going to receive is going to have is going to bring value, then, and you know that you're bringing value for money, then that's also a very important aspect. And lastly, demonstrated track record of success with similar projects. That is also a really big one. It might not be in the exactly like the project that you're trying to get funding for now, but if it's something that's similar, that also still shows that that you could receive the money and that it could go a long way. So in terms of grant monitoring and evaluation, we're looking for proposals that have the most effective impact on GPP objectives. So basically, preference would be given to proposals which have demonstrated ability to provide effective impact most efficiently, that can deliver impact to multiple fund objectives, and also that target the focus communities. Just to highlight a bit more about this one, the organization that is applying for the funding doesn't necessarily have to be based in a low income country or a lower middle income country. So it could be based anywhere in the world. But what matters is that the work that is going to be done with this project is going to benefit the focus communities who we mentioned. So it could be I'll give an example of the Technical University of Hamburg. So they're based in Germany, which is not a low income country or a low middle income country. But the work that they're doing with For Science is targeting and benefiting the focus communities. So it's benefiting organizations that are based in low income countries and in lower middle income countries. So it might be helpful also if you take a look at the evaluation rubric, and you could actually use this to try to score yourself if you're able to take a look at your applications from that perspective. So there are 7 evaluation criteria which we use to determine which grantees are most likely to have the largest impact on the fund objectives. And there's a link included there to the evaluation rubric in case you would like to take a better look at it. So some of the things that we look at are, in what way does your application benefit the fund's target communities? And so your answers are then assessed according to what's in the rubric. And also each criterion will be rated on a scale of 0 to 4. And also there's another one about supporting local partners. How complete is the program? So what is the justification of this program? Also the feasibility, the relationship to the organization's mission and goals, sustainability, and also use of resources and approach efficiency. So these are the things that we would be scoring your application against. So that's all from me. Happy to answer any questions that might have come up.
Well, thanks so much, Lambe. Do want to encourage anyone who has questions to go ahead and submit them using the Q&A button. We've left plenty of time to answer your questions. As we wait for some of those to come in, we did have a few submitted at registration. So someone asks specifically, Lambe, is about a specific country being able to apply. So I think it might be more useful for everyone. Where can people find out what countries do qualify to apply for the grant?
Thanks, Kimberly. So I'm going to share the updated World Bank classification list, but also, like I mentioned, the organization that is applying doesn't have to be based in a low income or lower income country, but it's important to show how your work is going to benefit the focus communities. but I will share it here.
And we'll be sure to include this link in the follow-up materials as well, so people have it for their reference. So thank you, Lombe. The next question that we have is, are matching funds required for these applications?
Absolutely not. So if you, as long as you fill all the requirements and the eligibility, requirements, then you can go ahead and submit your application. You do not need to have any matching funds for this.
That's good to know. I'm sure that helps out some of the organizations looking to apply. And then should an organization be awarded, are there any requirements for them post recipient of the grant? Like, do they need to provide monthly updates on what they're doing or any progress reports?
That's a great question. So we do have monthly updates, but these ones are not, they're not very formal. They're more, what we're trying to do is to encourage interaction with the different grantees. So we do have monthly update meetings, and there is the only formal requirement would be the report that is submitted at the end of the grant period. So that's the only official report, so to speak. So it would be a financial report and a narrative report, but other than that, it's just monthly update meetings, just so we know how you're doing, how we can support you, how we can connect you to other grantees, that sort of thing. Yeah.
Sounds good. And then could you remind us of the submission deadline? And then if you're able, can you tell us the timeline of when to expect a decision?
Sure. So this information is also shared when you submit your application, but the deadline is the 3rd of November. And in terms of decisions, we will be making a decision by December or January. So you should be able to hear back by January about your application, and feedback will be provided as well. Yeah.
So feedback for those who weren't awarded, they'll understand why their application wasn't chosen.
Yes. Yes.
And then can they use that feedback to then resubmit for a future grant cycle?
Absolutely. That is very welcome.
Good. That's good to know. Our next question is it possible for a university to apply for the grant in order to help their faculty, researchers, and graduate students with ORCID advocacy and improved open science output?
That's a good question. So yes, the university is allowed to apply, but I would suggest that the way that the approach is shown needs to show that it is going to benefit a large, either a large number of people, or it's going to have a multiplier effect. Just so you can show that there's sustainability, and it's not just a project that is like an activity. So it's not just a project that comes in and you have a one-off activity and then that's the end, because you have you've shown the benefits of ORCID to the faculty members and the students, and then it ends there. So that really wouldn't feed into the sustainability aspect. So depending on your approach and how you show that it's going to have an impact on sustainability and that sort of thing. And if you are also able to show if there's going to be a multiplier effect, how you explain that is going to determine whether the application is going to stand a good chance. And I would also highly encourage you, sorry, Kimberly, I would also highly encourage you to take a look at the previous winners, the previous awardees, because you can see the type of projects that they're doing, and also how they have built in that sustainability aspect, because it's something that we think would be really helpful in the long run.
And then would it make sense, depending on where people are located or where this university is, instead of perhaps just focusing on their university, maybe they take a like a countrywide approach?
Yes, yes, a countrywide approach. That's the best way to put it. Yeah. So if it's something that's a countrywide approach, then that's something that would show would show both sustainability and also higher impact.
All right, I think that's a very helpful answer. Um, we've talked a little bit about previous awardees and the two different types of grant funds available for like community development or technical integration. Are you able to give us a brief example of each one?
Sure. So we've only had one awardee that received the technical integration grant, and this is the Technical University of Hamburg. I was trying to reshare my screen. So yeah, I'm just going to show this particular slide, which shows the previous grantees from the first cycle. And so in the most recent cycle, we didn't have any technical integration grants, unfortunately. So this one is the only one that we have at the moment. So what they did is that they're trying to see how they can improve login for DSpace CRIS. There was actually a whole webinar about this, explaining exactly how they have done this for how they're improving how they're improving login for ORCID users who using DSpace CRIS. And in terms of the community development and outreach grants, we had 4 from the first cycle. And one of these is EcoConnect, which is based in Nigeria. And what they're trying to do is also to increase ORCID uptake. And this is mainly in Nigeria, but also in West Africa, because EcoConnect is part of WACREN, which is the West and Central African Research and Education Network. So you can see from these 2 different grantees that they are doing very specific work to try to increase ORCID uptake in those countries and those regions, but also to improve to help ORCID users to have better access to DSpace CRIS and those different systems. And thank you, Kimberly, for sharing that link. And yeah, so I think that webinar would also be really helpful in explaining the technical integration grants. We've only had 1 so far, so it would be really great if we had some technical integration grant applications coming in.
Absolutely. And like Wambe said, I shared the link. I might need to share it again. I don't think I shared the right one. I will share the link to yesterday's webinar featuring Forscience and the Technical University of Hamburg, where they did talk about the grant that they received and how they're using it and the improvements that they're making. And I just shared the correct link in the chat. So definitely, when you have time, check that out. It was a great webinar and it was really good information. Our next question is there a maximum amount of funding that people are allowed to submit for?
Yes, so the minimum is 5,000, but the maximum is $20,000 US. So we have a lower and upper limit. So 20,000 is the maximum.
And when submitting proposals, there's a section to include supplemental materials. Is that where you would want to see like a full budget showing how they would use all of the funds?
No, so I'm going to share my screen again. So there's a section that is that allows you to show this. So this is the application. This is the application form. So just after you answer the question about how much funding you're requesting, there's a part here that says project budget. And this is where you would provide that breakdown. So it says, please submit a budget that includes the size of grant you're requesting and how you expect to use these funds. And examples of these categories would include, but are not limited to, personnel, travel, events, equipment, and materials. Your budget should include details by category. So yeah, so it should show exactly how much you're spending for either personnel, for coming up with a new system, new integration, that sort of thing. So it should be itemized. Your budget should be itemized, and that is what you'd be uploading here under project budget. So here you would be putting the actual figure, and here is where you'd be uploading the file that shows exactly how you would be spending the money. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, that makes sense. Thanks for showing us the exact places for those items again. And then who do we contact if we have questions during the submission process?
So in case you have questions, I would say the first thing would be to check the frequently asked questions. I think that link was shared. It must be in the resources. So the first thing would be to check the frequently asked questions. And if your question isn't answered there, you can send an email to grants@orchid.org, and someone will get back to you.
And then you mentioned that there's support from ORCID once a grant has been awarded. Is there, like you mentioned, monthly meetings? Is there more touch points than that, or what kind of support are awardees receiving?
Yes, so we do have a Slack channel for all the awardees, actually. So that's that would be one of the first points of contact. So there's a Slack channel, and we have the monthly meetings. But outside of that, there's dedicated contact. So I would be the contact person for any questions you might have, and I can be reached via the Slack channel or we can also discuss during the monthly update meetings. But also outside of that, in case there's anything additional, I would still be the person who would reach out to either ORCID, either the advisory members for the GPP or other ORCID members, and then that's how we support the grantees. Yeah,
that sounds good. Someone is asking if the recording will be shared. Yes. So as this session ends and over the next few days, check your email. You'll be getting an email from Zoom, from ORCID Events, that includes the recording. It'll also include the presentation materials, and will include all these helpful links that Lambe has shared as well. So everyone can find the information that they need and share it with whomever needs to see it within their institution so they can get started on their grant proposal. And Lambe, can you remind us again when the submission deadline is?
Yes, the 3rd of November. So we still have a few more weeks for you to polish up those applications.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then it was mentioned, but I think it's worth bringing up again. Does an organization have to be an ORCID member to apply?
Absolutely not. So whether you're an ORCID member or a potential ORCID member, you are still welcome to apply for this, for the funding. So yeah, please do apply.
It's good to know. We do still have time for questions, so if there's any more questions out there, please feel free to submit them. Lambe, can you give us a little detail about, maybe not specifically, or specifically if it's all right, who the decision makers are, or where they come from, so people know who is looking at their applications?
So we use expertise from within the organization. So there are people who have expertise in the technical side of things, and also people with expertise on the different regions that need funding. Specifically, ORCID that need more ORCID uptake. And so all this expertise is within the organization, and it goes through various processes. There are several reading phases from different people, just to make sure that we don't have any bias. So yeah, so there are several stages that the application goes through before the final decision is made. And any feedback that comes up from the different people is definitely shared at the end of the review process. Yeah.
All right, that's good to know. I'm going to give it another minute or two to see if anyone else submits any questions. In the meantime, I want to share some links in the chat. We hope to see everyone at a future ORCID event. We've got a lot coming up for November. If you check out our events calendar, you'll see all of those there. And then we also invite you to catch up on our previous webinars, which are available on our ORCID On Demand page. So that page, you'll be able to see the previous recordings of this webinar. This webinar will be up on that page in the next few days. We are also planning on sharing a Spanish version of this webinar coming up in the next few days. So Spanish speakers will have access to this information in their native language. I guess my last question for you, Lombe, is if there's one thing you want people to keep in mind when they're making their submissions, what would it be?
I would say, I think I would just say that people should go back and take a look at what ORCID's objectives are and show how your amazing work is feeding into these objectives. Sometimes I just see that there's a disconnect. So just make sure that you bring those two things together, show how your work is going to feed into the bigger picture. Yeah, that would be my advice.
That's great advice. Thank you, Lombe. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. Again, this is being recorded and it will be shared in the next few days, so be on the lookout for that in your email. If you have any questions, Lombe, how can they reach out?
So they can send an email to grants@orcid.org after looking at the frequently asked questions.
Yep, and the link to the frequently asked questions is available right now, so be sure to check that out. It'll also be included in the follow-up materials. And if there are no other questions, I think we'll give everybody some time back in their day, and we look forward to reading everybody's wonderful submissions in the coming weeks. Thanks, Lombe.
Thanks, Kimberly. Thanks, everyone.